Since the last time I played Overwatch, as part of my video talking about whether or not the healer role should become easier to play, I had played it a few more times because the community has since chilled out as a majority of that toxicity migrated over to Rivals. Rivals is dealing with what made Overwatch at times hard to play. Can't say that it's just ranked because lately quick play has also been dealing with it. I've kept in-game voice chat disabled and it has been good, but in-game chat still exists, and from my personal experience, it's been pretty stable so far. The occasional, hey, you're being diffed, or hey, you're being countered, you just need to switch, isn't what I'd call toxic, nor should it be ever referred to as a type of toxicity, just teammates wanting to point out your struggles with a particular character. Unfortunately, as new players come in, they will be facing the brunt of the less than ideal part of the community, but veteran players aren't safe either. For new players, it's just the fact that they have maps, heroes, modes, and everything else in between to learn, while no doubt coming across players who have little patience, while veteran players will always have one of those games where everything is working against them. It's happened to me and it'll keep happening to me just as much as the next person. There is such a thing as having a bad game before quickly turning things around in the next one. While you might say otherwise, I believe that is the main reason hero shooters and MOBAs get such a bad reputation. I've seen it just as often as I have in Heroes of the Storm, Overwatch, and Smite, the only other MOBA and hero shooters I've ever played. In fact, I do remember one particular game I had in Rivals Ranked, Season 1 I believe, or Season 0, I think that's what they called it. I was primarily just healing in all of Season 0. And at the time, I was just focused on wanting to just heal, just because at the time, my DPS game wasn't great and my tanking wasn't really there. When Emma came out, I really started focusing more on tank. But I still remember this one particular player was playing Storm. He didn't want to switch off, and he was actually being countered pretty heavily in that first game we were in. We did lose that game, and a lot of it I felt was because of the Storm player not wanting to switch off. He was being countered by a Bucky and a Star-Lord at the time, who were just, from what I believe, were solely focused on him, because this guy had double-digit deaths. It was pretty bad on him for his part on Storm. Now I shouldn't say it's probably entirely his fault, but I wasn't really struggling much at all with diving. The tanks weren't really struggling at all. I think it was just kind of bad team synergy at the time. Although there were a few counter picks here and there in our team, it's just the Storm refused to switch off. So I queue into the next ranked game, and I actually got paired up with the same player again, picking Storm again. I did want to point out to him that, he was struggling way too hard last game. He was being countered pretty heavily by two anti-air heroes, and he still refused to switch off, and his excuse was it was just a bad game. So I was like, okay, that's fine. If it was a bad game, then whatever, we'll just move on. I'm not someone that'll get heated over a character who doesn't swap off or anything like that, not like other players. I'll just simply point something out and kind of just state a fact like, hey, you might have been able to help a little bit more if you weren't using this particular character, but it's whatever. It was just water under the bridge at that point. I just wanted to focus on healing and get through the next game. Hopefully we could win it. We actually did end up winning, and he not only did he get MVP, but he was actually pretty strong this time around. Although that particular game at the time, he had no anti-air to deal with. There weren't any Buckies, there weren't any Star-Lords, there weren't Punishers. There was no one to actually really counter the Storm, so the Storm player actually did pretty well this time around, and was actually, apart from the really good heals from me and the other support that we had for our one tank on the team, I mean, we were making some pretty strong pushes, but the Storm was pretty much uncontested that entire game, and we ended up winning. It was a convoy, by the way. Both that game and the previous game were both convoys, but he did pretty well. So I would attribute it to the fact maybe it was a bad game, but at the same time, he had no one contesting him at all. There was no anti-air on their side. So attributing to that win was the fact that the enemy team just didn't want to counterplay at all. One of the first things that's being brought up more and more often now is how quick play is quickly transitioning to more comp-esque style of play. You can't have more than 2 games before players on either side will mention how mental everyone is playing, with the usual response always being, well, it's just quick play. But I do agree, because when you do go into ranked, suddenly, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this already, when you go into a ranked game, suddenly games aren't as fast paced, teams are pretty disorganized, and there's very few counter picking, if any, which usually leaves a team that's currently being countered to just being spawn camped for the entirety of the game. The only time they'll even try to make a push is when the other team allows them to, or in some very rare occasional cases, the team will make that necessary change, and suddenly they're making a very strong push. I'm sure we've seen, or not seen, but I'm sure we've been on both sides of something like that. You're being spawn camped pretty heavily, then for some reason 1 or 2 players on your team will suddenly swap off whatever hero they're using and pick someone who's a little bit easier to use, or maybe someone who can actually counter the enemy team, and then you're suddenly making these really strong pushes and you can actually win that round or win that whole game. And in case you haven't noticed, the background footage actually is a ranked game, not a quick play. All of my other previous videos for a while were actually all quick play games, so you could probably see the difference too in just my gameplay alone. The other team is pretty bad at the moment. They're not doing much. I haven't seen any counter picks. For some reason, they've got a Spider-Man. Spider-Man is being countered pretty good by the Storm we have on our team. The Storm is pretty good. And then, of course, we have me and Mr. Fantastic on the front line. And all they have right now is just... I was going to call him Mr. Strange for some reason. But all they have right now is Doctor Strange. The only one I see trying to make a solid push and actually get their team further to the objective is Cloak and Dagger with her ults. That's the one thing I've always loved about Cloak and Dagger's ult. It is good area denial, but it's also good for really pushing up players. That way she can stay as Cloak and actually get some extra damage in. So it's a really good way to push up teams. It's just unfortunately the rest of her team just didn't want to follow suit. I don't know why they're just not making that push, but as you can see from my point is that their team is pretty disorganized. They're not doing much. I can almost guarantee that if this was a team using the same exact heroes in quick play, it probably would be a different story. There'd be a lot more pushback, a lot more back and forth, consistent tug of war type play with the objective. They probably would have also moved up to the second checkpoint. Granted, this is gold, and I have been pretty lazy with my rank ups and not actually going back up into diamond and trying to make grandmaster. Like, you know, before the reset, I was at 99 out of 100 points on diamond 1, getting ready to make that transition to grandmaster when the reset happened. So I lost all that progress, and then, you know, was surprised to see when I read the patch notes we were going to get bumped down 9 divisions. So I'm not too worried about the climb back into at least high tier diamond, and hopefully I can actually get out of diamond, because a lot of these ranked games, they're just, I don't know, it's hard to describe. I had more problems trying to make my way through platinum than I did making my way through diamond. I don't know what was going on there. Platinum just seemed to feel like I was playing in bronze, while some of the earlier bronze games I had, you know, back in season 0 when I first started playing ranked, those bronze games were far more intense than they were now. I don't know, who knows, maybe that is just a lot of the people who play ranked usually are now playing quick play, while people who usually played quick play back in the early days are probably wanting to play ranked now. Ranked just feels so laid back compared to what quick play is turning into. I mean, a lot of these players who don't seem to know what they're doing that are playing ranked, I mean, I am playing to win. It is a ranked game. That's the kind of the purpose of competitive. If I'm playing competitive, I'm actually going to compete to win. Although my Emma doesn't look like to be in a good state right now, kind of depending on the gameplay, but that's also because the other team isn't really giving me a whole lot to work with as far as my Emma goes. I can't be really too aggressive because they're kind of just sitting in the back, kind of hiding. That's kind of been most of my ranked games so far. I've played about 3 or 4 games, and only a couple of these were recorded, and that's with my Emma gameplay. Because believe it or not, the other 2 games that I had recorded, they were so boring. They were just completely uninteresting to watch. I didn't even enjoy looking at them while I was editing the footage, because I originally had them as part of this video. But there's just nothing going on. It was almost like a walking simulator, basically. The enemy team, they were just hiding, just sitting back in spawn. Just everyone's kind of pushing up by one. It didn't make for good gameplay. Some of the worst ranked matches I've ever played. Like those other games I had recorded I chose not to post, those are the literal definition of free elo. When the team requires it and no one else is tanking, I can make the switch. My spider sense goes off and tells me this is the way to avoid at least one potential hiccup within the team. However, my primary tank is Emma, with my backup being Magneto. If Emma is already taken and a second tank is needed, I am able to comfortably swap over to Magneto, who doesn't have too much trouble as far as dealing with his counters. Usually a counter against Magneto usually sees a teammate who can counter them, leaving to a balanced state of play. And assuming the skill of said players is on par with one another, my skill with Magneto isn't as strong as my skill with Emma. When up against one of Emma's counters, Wolverine, I know well enough how he tries to engage her and that I can utilize her kit properly. Most of the time, coming out of those fights as the victor with little to no health remaining. I have no problems tanking on my other team, or not on my other team. I have no problems taking on any other tank, including another Emma, and I'm able to provide the necessary peel for the supports as well. Emma was pretty easy for me to pick up day 1 simply because her playstyle demands aggressiveness, and the more aggressive I can be, the easier and more efficient I'll be within that specified role. It's one reason why Luna is my main healer. Then there's Magneto, whom I have a firm grasp with as far as his playstyle goes, but I still have my struggles with him. This is where I start encountering the get off Magneto or get off tank comments. I'll have players whom I didn't know had mics seemingly turn their mics on just to tell me to get off Magneto or that I suck or whatever before going radio silent again, and never even bother using the in-game chat. One of the big things that's easy to point out is those same players telling another player they're doing bad or need to swap or anything along those lines when they themselves aren't doing any better, if not worse, than whoever they're trying to call out. I don't have to mention strategists. We already know what being a strategist is like. Being told your heals aren't on point when you're dealing with the other problems already associated with being a healer. The last thing someone needs to be telling you is that your heals aren't there. This is one thing I personally enjoy about the 2.5 update. I've legit been able to take breaks from healing because healers are being insta-locked before I'm loaded into the lobby. Getting to a point now where I can comfortably flex whatever is needed at this point. But if the mics go off and players start arguing about who's not doing their job or what have you, I'll just mute the lobby. I am a solo player. I've never grouped up with any other player before. The last time I ever grouped up with a full team was when I successfully beat the Crypt raid from Destiny 2 on day 1. Granted, it took close to 17 hours to complete, but still, it was my first day, and I still managed to get that first day achievement. So naturally, I'm used to keeping my voice chat settings disabled and will seldomly enable them. I've never had the opportunity to group with a full stack and experience proper teamwork and communication apart from my days in Destiny. With that said, as I make my way back to Diamond and hopefully Grandmaster this time around, as Season 2 saw me, again, as I mentioned earlier, 99 out of 100 points in Diamond 1 before the reset happened. That really sucked. I need to see what GM looks like in Rivals. I know the rage players have at those levels of play is close to that legendary Mario Kart rage we're all familiar with, and I want to see if it's real. Making the climb again doesn't seem so bad now that I'm able to actively play something other than strategist just to help keep things fresh for me, because I've mentioned before, playing strategist at this point with how often I play it, where I feel like I'm forced to play the role. If not, our team can't make a really solid push and we'll just end up losing or being spawn camped. Playing support is just kind of boring at this point for me. The point of this video is not to combat toxicity, but just ways I've learned to deal with it. It does suck if you're someone who likes teamwork, proper communication, but you're constantly hearing players rage while you're trying to talk strategy, especially if they're the only player or the only other player with an open mic. We've all had games where it's completely silent, even in the higher levels of play, but everyone is able to work together and come out on top, even if it means just marking a specific enemy player. If you work with what you have, it can usually lead to avoiding unnecessary forms of toxicity, which can lead to a smoother experience. Or it could just be you're just a loser and you're playing solo ranked and everyone else on the team is stacked and they're all talking in Discord. Could be it too. I honestly keep forgetting about Discord. I haven't used it since my Destiny days. There's my Discord info for anyone who might be interested and want to group up for Overwatch or Rivals or what have you. I don't use Discord very often. A lot of times, even though it says I'm online, I'm never paying attention to it. I use it only specifically for grouping up purposes. I don't really talk to anyone on there. Feel free to hit me up. Otherwise, end video.